defense mechanism theory. Chandler's sarcasm as emotional armor. Chandler Bing is remembered as the funny one, the guy with the fastest comeback, the one who never lets a moment breathe without filling it with a joke. But if you actually watch him closely, something strange starts to appear. Chandler doesn't joke when he's relaxed. He doesn't joke when he feels safe. He jokes when he's trapped. Every time a situation gets emotionally uncomfortable, Chandler's sarcasm steps in like a reflex. Awkward silences, serious talks, romantic tension, family, failure. The jokes arrive instantly, almost violently, as if something inside him is trying to shut the moment down before it can reach him. That's not comedy, that's armor. Sarcasm gives Chandler control. It turns vulnerability into performance. If he makes the joke first, he decides the tone. If he laughs at himself, no one else can hurt him. If he keeps things funny, they never have to get real. Humor becomes his shield, his way of staying involved without ever being exposed. Notice how rarely Chandler uses sarcasm when he's genuinely content, when he's relaxed with Monica, when he feels accepted, when he believes, even briefly, that he belongs. In those moments, the jokes soften. Sometimes they disappear completely. And when they do, Chandler suddenly feels like a different person. Because the truth is, Chandler's sarcasm isn't there to entertain. It's there to protect. It steps forward whenever he feels judged, cornered, or emotionally unsafe. The laugh track hears a punchline, but underneath it, something else is happening. A man is building a wall out of jokes and hoping no one ever asks what's behind it. The childhood wound theory. How his parents' divorce built the joke. Chandler didn't grow up in a quiet home. He grew up in a spectacle. A house where emotions were public, arguments were performances, and embarrassment was unavoidable. His parents didn't just separate. They did it loudly, bitterly, in front of other people. And for a kid, that kind of chaos doesn't just hurt, it teaches. Young Chandler learned early that feelings could turn into weapons, that vulnerability could become entertainment for others, that the people who were supposed to protect him could also be the ones making him feel exposed. So he adapted. And his adaptation was humor. Sarcasm became his way to stay ahead of the pain. If he could turn a moment into a joke, he could control how it landed. If he laughed first, he didn't have to wait for someone else to do it. And if everything became funny, then nothing had to feel serious enough to hurt him. You can see this wound echo through adult Chandler. He gets especially sarcastic around family topics, relationships, and anything involving emotional history. Those areas are where his jokes become sharpest, fastest, and sometimes cruelest. Not because he's cold, but because those subjects still feel dangerous. Children from unstable homes often grow up hyper-aware of emotional shifts. Chandler reads the room like a survival skill. And the second he senses tension, disappointment, or possible rejection, he fires a joke into it like a flare. What looks like a personality is actually a coping system built in childhood. His humor didn't come from confidence. It came from exposure. From learning that if you can make people laugh, they might forget to look at you too closely. And for Chandler Bing, not being looked at too closely once meant feeling safe. Before we move on, I'd like to ask you a small favor. If you're enjoying this content so far, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Over 98% of you watch these videos without subscribing. Imagine what we could accomplish if everyone subscribed. We all thank you for your continued support. The control theory. Jokes as a way to win before he can lose. Chandler's sarcasm isn't random. It's strategic. Almost every joke he makes does something very specific. It redirects attention. It changes the mood. It reshapes the moment. And most importantly, it gives him control. In emotional situations, Chandler almost always speaks first. Not because he has the best line, but because the first line defines the scene. Whoever makes the first joke decides whether a moment is serious, light, awkward, or dismissible. Chandler knows this instinctively. So before anyone else can label him, judge him, or corner him, he labels himself. This is why so many of his jokes are self-directed. He insults his own job, his own relationships, his own masculinity, his own worth. On the surface, it sounds like low-confidence humor. But underneath, it's something else. It's preemptive control. If he makes himself small first, no one else can take the power of doing it from him. Watch how often Chandler jokes right before something might emotionally cost him. Before rejection, before confrontation, before admitting fear. The sarcasm rushes in not to be funny. If the room is laughing, then he's not losing. If he's entertaining, then he's not being evaluated. Even when he's clearly hurting, Chandler frames it as a bit. He turns his own failures into punchlines and his anxieties into throwaway lines. Because as long as it's a joke, it's not a verdict. Chandler doesn't use humor to express himself. He uses it to manage outcomes, to soften blows, to dodge judgments, to rewrite emotional situations into something safer. His sarcasm is less about wit and more about power. It's how he stays one step ahead of pain. The rejection theory. Making fun of himself before anyone else can. One of the most consistent patterns in Chandler's humor is who he targets. And surprisingly often, the target is himself. He mocks his own job, his dating life, his body, his confidence, his masculinity, his emotional needs. He hands people jokes about himself before they ever ask for them. And that habit doesn't come from comfort. It comes from expectation. Chandler expects rejection. When someone believes rejection is inevitable, they stop waiting for it. They deliver it themselves in a softer form. Chandler's self-deprecating humor is him breaking his own fall. If he turns himself into a joke, then any real judgment feels weaker by comparison. He's already said worse. This is why compliments make Chandler visibly uncomfortable. He deflects them, ruins them, turns them into bits. Praise puts him in a dangerous position. It raises the emotional stakes. It creates something he could lose. And Chandler has never trusted good moments to stay. So instead of standing in confidence, he undercuts it. Instead of accepting attraction, he jokes it away. Instead of owning success, he disguises it. Because being valued makes rejection possible. And rejection, for Chandler, has always felt like the natural ending. His humor becomes a way to lower expectations, not just for others, but for himself. If he presents himself as the loser, the awkward one, the mess, then being treated that way won't shock him. It will feel familiar. Chandler's sarcasm doesn't just protect him from others, it protects him from hope. Because hope invites disappointment. And disappointment for someone like Chandler feels worse than loneliness. So he chooses the joke, the smaller version of himself, the version that can't fall very far. And in doing that, he stays funny, but he also stays safe. The intimacy theory. Why his humor spikes when things get real. If you want to see Chandler's sarcasm at its sharpest, watch him when something real is happening. New relationships, emotional talks, confessions, commitment. The closer someone gets, the faster the jokes come. His humor doesn't fade when intimacy enters the room. It intensifies. Because intimacy removes distance. And distance is where Chandler feels safest. Every joke Chandler makes in these moments does the same thing. It pulls the focus away from his feelings and puts it back on the performance. Instead of answering honestly, he reframes. Instead of sitting in vulnerability, he turns it into a laugh. The room stays light, but he stays hidden. Chandler wants connection deeply. That's what makes this pattern painful to watch. He craves love, stability, and understanding. But the second he's close to getting them, his sarcasm activates like an alarm system. As if something inside him is warning that this is where people get hurt. Real intimacy means being seen without the mask. It means not controlling the tone. It means trusting someone else with your emotional state. And for Chandler, trust has always been fragile. So he uses humor to manage closeness, not to reject it, but to dilute it, to keep it at a level where he can still breathe, where he can still escape if things turn. Notice how often potential romantic moments are broken by a joke. How many serious conversations end in a one-liner. How often sincerity only lasts a second before being covered. Chandler doesn't joke because he doesn't care. He jokes because he cares too much. Because if a moment really matters, then it has the power to change him or leave him. And both possibilities feel terrifying. So he reaches for the one thing that has never left him. The joke. The masculinity theory. Hiding from an identity. He was afraid to defend. Chandler's sarcasm often circles the same subjects: his body, his voice, his interests, his emotional reactions, and especially how he is perceived as a man. Again and again, Chandler is mistaken, teased, or questioned about his masculinity. And again, he answers not with anger or clarity, but with humor. He leans into the joke. He exaggerates it. He performs it before anyone else can. That pattern isn't accidental. It's avoidance. Chandler grows up in a world that keeps sending him mixed signals about what a man is supposed to be: strength, confidence, emotional control, clear identity. And he doesn't feel like he naturally fits any of it. Instead of fighting those expectations, he sidesteps them. He turns them into bits. Sarcasm becomes the place he hides the confusion. If he laughs about it, he doesn't have to define it. If he jokes about it, he doesn't have to defend it. Humor lets him exist in the question without ever answering it. That's why Chandler almost never corrects people seriously. He rarely draws lines, rarely claims space. He keeps things slippery, because claiming an identity means risking judgment. And judgment for him has always been loud. So he chooses the safer position. The guy who doesn't take himself seriously. The guy who can't be pinned down. The guy whose personality is humor instead of certainty. But behind the jokes is a man who is deeply unsure how he is allowed to exist. What parts of himself are acceptable? What parts need to be hidden? What parts will be laughed at? Chandler's sarcasm isn't mocking masculinity. It's sheltering from it. It gives him a place to stand where he doesn't have to prove anything. Where he can stay undefined. Where he can stay unchallenged. And where no one can tell him he's doing it wrong, because he never claimed to be doing it at all. The workplace theory. The office as his funniest and most miserable space. Nowhere is Chandler's sarcasm more constant than at work. In the office, his jokes don't come and go. They live there. They sharpen. They repeat. They almost replace him. And that's because his workplace is where Chandler feels most trapped. He doesn't understand his job. He doesn't like his job. He doesn't feel proud of his job. And most importantly, he doesn't feel seen in it. He's surrounded by routines, titles, and expectations that don't connect to who he thinks he is. So he does the only thing he knows how to do. He mocks it. Every sarcastic comment about his work is a small rebellion, a way to say, "This isn't me," without ever leaving. A way to distance himself from a life he feels stuck inside. The jokes make the space bearable. They also make it numb. Chandler's workplace humor is different from his friend group humor. It's drier, tighter, sometimes almost bitter. It's not about connection. It's about survival. Getting through another day without admitting he's unhappy. Because admitting that would mean change. And change would mean risk. And risk would mean stepping out from behind the one thing that's always protected him. So he becomes the funny guy at the office. The sarcastic one. The one who never seems to care. But watch closely and you'll see that the jokes don't lift him there. They flatten him. They reduce him to commentary. At work, Chandler isn't expressing himself. He's disappearing into humor. It's the place where his sarcasm is loudest because it's covering the quiet truth that scares him most. that he built a life he doesn't know how to live in. The friendship theory, the one place where the mask almost comes off. With most people, Chandler's humor is automatic, but with his friends, something different happens. The jokes are still there, but they soften, they wander, they sometimes fail, and every now and then, they stop. Because this is the only place Chandler doesn't fully need the armor. Around Joey, Monica, Ross, Rachel, and Phoebe, Chandler is allowed to be small without being dismissed, awkward without being rejected, emotional without being exposed. The group laughs at his jokes, but they also wait for him when he can't make one. This is where you start seeing cracks in the persona. Moments where he admits fear, where he sits in sadness, where he doesn't rush to perform. The sarcasm becomes less of a shield and more of a voice. With Joey especially, Chandler drops the act more than he realizes. He panics, he confesses, he needs, and instead of losing respect, he gains connection. It slowly teaches him something new. That humor can exist alongside honesty. That jokes don't always have to replace it. This is also why Chandler changes most around Monica. Not because she fixes him, but because she consistently stays when he isn't funny, when he's insecure, when he's difficult, when he's scared. Friendship gives Chandler a controlled environment to test a dangerous idea. What if he doesn't have to earn space by entertaining? What if he's allowed to take up space just by existing? His sarcasm doesn't vanish in these relationships, but it transforms. It becomes warmer, more playful, less sharp, less defensive. Because for the first time, Chandler is surrounded by people who aren't waiting for him to be something. They already chose him, and that slowly changes the way he jokes. The Monica shift theory. When his sarcasm starts to evolve, Chandler's humor doesn't disappear when he gets with Monica, but it changes. And that change is one of the quietest pieces of character growth in the entire show. Before Monica, Chandler's sarcasm is mostly about escape. Escaping seriousness, escaping responsibility, escaping himself. After Monica, his jokes still land, but they don't always run. They sit. They share space with honesty. For the first time, Chandler is in a relationship where he isn't auditioning. He isn't chasing. He isn't trying to be liked. He's already chosen. And because of that, the function of his humor shifts. He no longer needs to disarm every emotional moment. You start seeing scenes where he stays in them, where the joke comes after the truth instead of replacing it, where sarcasm becomes commentary, not cover. Monica also challenges him in a way no one else does. She doesn't let him hide inside jokes forever. She calls him out. She waits for real answers. She creates moments where humor isn't enough. And instead of leaving, Chandler stays. That's new. You see it when he admits fear about marriage, about being a good husband, about becoming his parents. The jokes still appear, but they wobble. They're nervous, not blocking. They're attached to feeling, not replacing it. This is where Chandler's sarcasm stops being only armor and starts becoming personality. Something he uses, not something he lives inside. Because now there is someone in his life who sees past the punchline and doesn't go away. And when humor is no longer the only thing keeping someone close, it finally gets the chance to become what it was never allowed to be before. Just a joke. The silence theory. The rare moments when Chandler doesn't joke at all. Some of the most important Chandler moments don't have punchlines. They're quiet, uncomfortable, short, and easy to miss. Because Chandler not joking feels strange. It creates a gap. And in that gap, you see the person he's been protecting the whole time. When Chandler is truly overwhelmed, his sarcasm doesn't sharpen. It shuts off. He stares. He listens. He speaks slowly. These are the moments when his system fails. When humor can't organize the feeling. When the situation is too real to be redirected. Watch him during serious conversations about commitment, loss, or self-worth. There are pauses where the joke should be. And instead, there's just him. Unsure, open, small. Those silences are emotional tells. They show where the armor ends. And what's underneath isn't a comedian. It's someone who feels deeply but doesn't fully trust his feelings. Someone who wants stability but doesn't believe it lasts. Someone who learned early to talk fast because slowing down meant being seen. Silence is dangerous to Chandler because it invites response. It lets other people step forward. It hands control over. And that's why he fills most space with humor. So when he doesn't, it means something has broken through the defense. Fear, love, shock, relief, pain. These are the moments where the audience stops laughing and starts recognizing him. Because without the jokes, Chandler doesn't look clever. He looks human. And in those rare, quiet seconds, the show accidentally reveals the truest version of him. The one the sarcasm was built to guard. Not a punchline. A person. The fear of happiness theory. Why Chandler struggles most when things go right. Chandler is used to chaos, awkwardness, disappointment, emotional unpredictability. Those spaces are familiar. He knows how to move inside them. He knows what to say. He knows how to protect himself. But happiness is different. Happiness doesn't give him a script. When things are going wrong, Chandler's sarcasm flows easily. It has a purpose. It blocks embarrassment. It reframes failure. It manages discomfort. But when things are going right, his humor often becomes restless, smaller, sometimes forced, as if he's waiting for something to break. This is why Chandler doesn't fully relax when he gets what he wants. Not the job change, not the relationship, not even marriage at first. You can see him scanning the moment, poking it with jokes, testing its weight, almost daring it to fall apart. Because for someone who grew up in emotional instability, happiness doesn't feel safe. It feels temporary, suspicious, like the calm before something humiliating, disappointing, or painful. So Chandler jokes inside good moments too. But the tone shifts. It's not sharp, it's anxious. The humor becomes a way to stay ready. If he never fully steps into happiness, then he never fully risks losing it. He often treats good things like accidents, like things he somehow slipped into without permission. And that mindset makes celebration difficult. Confidence dangerous. Contentment unfamiliar. This is also why commitment scares him more than loneliness. Loneliness hurts, but it's predictable. Happiness raises the emotional ceiling. And the higher something sits, the further it can fall. Chandler's sarcasm in these moments becomes a way to lower the height of joy, to keep it reachable, to keep it manageable. Because deep down, he doesn't fear sadness. He fears how much it would hurt to lose something that finally feels good. The growth theory. What happens when the joke isn't needed anymore? By the later seasons, something subtle but powerful happens to Chandler's humor. It stops being automatic. The jokes are still there. He's still quick, still sarcastic, still Chandler. But the urgency behind it fades. He no longer needs to comment on every feeling. He no longer rushes to dissolve serious moments. He can sit inside them. This is growth. Not the loss of humor, but the loss of dependence on it. You start seeing Chandler speak plainly. Say what he wants. Admit what he's afraid of. Own what he cares about. And when he jokes, it feels lighter. Chosen, not required. This shift tells us everything about what his sarcasm always was. A tool, a shield, a language he used before he learned another one. As his life becomes more stable, his need to control every emotional room decreases. As he builds real security, the jokes stop carrying the entire weight of his identity. They become flavor instead of structure. This is also why later Chandler sometimes feels less funny to people, because he's less defended. His humor isn't carrying his survival anymore. It's just part of him. And what replaces it isn't dullness, it's presence. He listens more. He supports more. He reacts instead of deflecting. He becomes someone whose value in the group isn't just entertainment, but emotional reliability. The biggest sign of Chandler's growth isn't marriage. It's that he no longer needs to turn every feeling into a performance. He can let moments be what they are. And in doing that, he finally becomes the one thing sarcasm never allowed him to be: at ease. Chandler's sarcasm made us laugh, but it also told his story. Not of a man who loved jokes, but of a man who needed them. And once you see that, you never hear his one-liners the same way again. If you enjoyed watching, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button and drop us a note in the comments letting us know what you want to see us do next.